Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Football Pod. We're talking gambling for NFL Championship Weekend. Nick Whalen and John McKechnie here with you. And we'll keep this one quick, John. We got a busy day. You got meetings. I got a flight to catch to Arizona to play some golf. But we had to squeeze this in a day early this week and make sure we get our picks on the record. Let's start with the Ravens, man. You're going to be in the house this weekend. I'm extremely envious. Hanging out with your dad. Like, there's nothing better than going to a big football game with your father. I can tell you that. I've been to a few with my dad. Most of them has been crushing Packers losses. But I think your dad's also much more of a capital F, capital G football guy than my dad. So I'll ask you, what is your frame of mind going into this weekend for the Ravens, and how's your dad holding up mentally?
I'm excited to be there. I kind of did a bit of the napkin math on, and not to be presumptuous, but if the Ravens were to make it to the Super Bowl, boy, that's going to be a pretty penny. And us as humble sports writers, I'm not sure if I could have justified that. However, a quick trip home to luxurious Baltimore, Maryland, and going to the AFC Championship game, that was much more palatable. So that felt like the best way of going about it. We'll just kind of have to figure out the February 11th plans if necessary as they come. But I'm pretty sure my dad's freaking out. I'm oddly zen, but I mean, I was honestly more stressed about the Texans game last week at this time than I am about the Chiefs game now. I think it was going in, it just felt like, all the chatter about Lamar's performance in the playoffs, which was, fairly justified for the most part. I do kind of wonder if people were subconsciously putting like the Bengals loss in the wild card round on Lamar last year. It's like, you do remember that was Tyler Huntley, right? But,
Yes.
but beyond that, I think it was huge to have the second half that Baltimore did and really kind of flex their muscle. Todd Monken said after the game, thank God that a football game is 60 minutes, not 30 minutes. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. They looked completely out of sorts. Right. I mean, it was a mess, the first half. I mean, the punt return for a touchdown, like the punting needs to get tightened up a little bit. Jordan Stout, a little bit, when you get to this stage of the postseason, you do have to get granular like that. And you do wonder about like things like your second year punter, that type of stuff. But I feel overall, I'm mostly just excited to be going up there. It should be a raucous environment. I believe Stavi, the comedian, and now kind of like the de facto celebrity mascot, our counter to Taylor Swift, is going to be in the house. So hopefully he can help provide the good vibes. And man, it's going to be a battle no matter what, though.
All right, well, let's talk about the betting side of that game. And it will be our first game on Sunday as we do the AFC, NFC alternating. I think, obviously this would have been the late game if the NFL had its way on that. But we're seeing the Ravens holding pretty steady as 3.5-point favorites. We'll be interested to see if that line moves at all throughout the week. But like I said, there really hasn't been much over the last 72 hours. It's been 3.5 across the board at DK, FanDuel, BetMGM, PointsBet, wherever you look. Total coming in at 44.5. We'll start on the total. It applies a relatively low scoring game, a 24-20 type of situation. Do you think that's the type of result that we get here?
I don't think if this goes over, it's going to go over by a ton, but it is important to note that Baltimore has been pretty routinely scoring over 30 points a game at home, basically since the second half of the season. So they've been great in that regard. And I think when you look at the in-game matchups, how the defenses match up against the offenses, I think that the glaring issue here would be the Kansas City run defense versus the Baltimore rushing offense. I think that could really tell the tale as far as when Baltimore has the ball. I'm not expecting Baltimore, even if Mark Andrews is back, to have a particularly explosive day through the air. I think there might be a little bit of weather in the forecast as well. Not snow, but a little bit of rain going on mid-afternoon in Baltimore, kind of a chilly day. So I'm not expecting a huge day out of Lamar through the air, but, effective enough, kind of akin to what we saw last week. But I do think that the run game is going to be big there. And frankly, I do think that the Ravens defense is playing at a level where we're not going to see the Chiefs have that explosive type of day on offense. I do think that their run game is far superior to what Houston was bringing to the table last week. I'm not expecting Isaiah Pacheco to be averaging like 1 yard a carry for outside of his longest run of the day, anything like that. But, I'm sure Andy Reid is going to scheme some things up. But, we've talked about over the course of this entire season where something feels off with this Chiefs offense. So I think it's going to come down to their defense and their ability to stop Lamar Jackson on the ground in particular that is going to dictate not just the outcome, but also the total in this one. But as it stands, my lean is to go on the over.
Yeah, it's low enough that, you have two pretty good offenses, right? I mean, the Chiefs are still kind of a question mark. Two great quarterbacks. 44.5 does seem low. Kansas City also scored on its first 5 drives against Buffalo last week. I think that's relatively unlikely. And the Chiefs also just didn't possess the ball all that much. I mean, they really only had 7 true drives. If you throw out, the one play before the end of the first half, and then, basically the just run out the clock drive after the missed field goal late in the fourth. So I'll be interested to see, what does that split look like? Baltimore is certainly capable of controlling the clock. I don't know if we get another like 37-23 in terms of time of possession. I mean, that was extreme. Buffalo ran 78 plays compared to only 47 for Kansas City. I mean, that's probably not happening again, but you mentioned it. I mean, the recipe for Baltimore is running the ball, right? I don't think they want Lamar throwing the ball 35 times in this game. I think something has probably gone wrong on the Baltimore side if that's the case. Like the way things played out, especially in the second half against Houston, that's exactly what you want, right? Lamar over 100 yards, over, I think he had 11 carries. Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, Dalvin Cook, all in the mix. They ran for 230 yards on that Houston defense. Like that is the preferred style for Baltimore. I guess the question is, you're stepping up a level going up against Kansas City, but it's also a defense that has been vulnerable against the run. And, we saw that last week. Buffalo, 182 yards. They did need 39 carries to get there. Wasn't an overly effective day for James Cook, but Ty Johnson had his moments. Obviously, Josh Allen, ran well. So I think this is another Lamar type of game. I'm of the belief that he's kind of been saving himself this season. I know, part of it is the new offense and whatnot, but I think he's been very, very selective, like notably selective. And, at times turning down, a free 5-6 yards to kind of hang around and try to find something through the air. I think in the postseason that goes out the window and we kind of return to the old Lamar Jackson, which in my opinion, as a runner, that's a good thing for Baltimore.
I think so too. I think he's maybe lost like a half a step relative to like his 2019 form, but I think he's still about as dangerous of a runner in the open field as there is in the NFL. So yeah, I mean, especially with how sticky the Chiefs coverage is, like if it's not there, Lamar's just gonna tuck it and pick up some yards that way. That's obviously to a lesser extent a big thing with Mahomes too. His ability to extend plays, like the linebacking core and the safeties are going to have to really be paying attention to Mahomes, because when the play breaks down and he can scramble for first down, that's the way that like the Chiefs right now, because they're not just routinely getting the explosives, like that's the way that they can possess and sustain drives and that type of thing. So they're definitely going to need to keep Mahomes bottled up as well, keep him in the pocket.
What say you on over under 64.5 rushing yards for Lamar Jackson?
I'll take the over. I think to your point, he's more willing to run at this point of the season than he was back in September when he had the full year ahead of him. And with the way that the 2020 and 21 and 22 seasons ended with him being injured, I think that he wanted to preserve himself to your point. So I think that he's going to be very active as a runner, and I know it's going to be very popular. I'm sure the handle on that is going to be, very, very heavily on the over, but yeah, I'm going with it.
Mm-hmm. Mark Andrews, by the way, expected to return. That was the report earlier this morning from Ian Rappaport. Again, has not officially happened, but Rapp saying he's expected to be activated from IR and play Sunday against the Chiefs. So I think Andrews and the Ravens looking pretty smart for not rolling him out there last week. I think he could have played. I think if last week was the AFC Championship game, I have a feeling he would have been out there. Felt like he was trending in the right direction toward the end of the week. But obviously Isaiah Likely, continued to step up in a big way, and they were just fine without him. But should be a nice boost to get Mark Andrews back. On the KC side of things, I've been looking at props this week, and it's like I just kind of zero in on Kelsey and Rice. That's all I really trust in the Kansas City offense, and ultimately, that's part of the reason I like Baltimore to win this game. Is like there's the Mahomes mystique, the unquantifiable. He just finds ways to win these games, even when he doesn't feel like he's putting on an all-time performance. Like I wouldn't say last week, there were all these plays where you're like, man, how do you defend that? Patrick Mahomes. It's like it was really Josh Allen to me who was making those throws. I thought Mahomes actually had some pretty big misses near the red zone, but the Chiefs just find a way, man. They do. I'm of the belief that this is the week that it runs out. This is the week that they realize our lack of weapons, our lack of trust, in anybody other than Kelsey and Rashee Rice. I think it runs out this week. And we saw kind of the return of MVS last week, had some big catches. I don't know if you can rely on that happening again. And I think if Baltimore can just contain even one of those guys, Rice and Kelsey, they're going to be in a pretty good spot here.
I think so too. So we'll have to keep an eye on the status of Marlon Humphrey, because his ability to be out there really boosts the secondary. But I think if you're watching particular Jimmy's and Joe's matchup, I think anytime that Kyle Hamilton and Travis Kelsey are tangling, that's going to be must-see football. That Kyle Hamilton has really come on in his second year, and Kelsey looked about as good as he's looked all year, I thought, last week. So maybe he, in a weird way, has also saved himself for these moments.
I think you're right about that. All right, before we talk Lions-Niners, official pick here against the number. Are you going Ravens 3.5, or are you taking the Chiefs to cover?
All the numbers say, just back Mahomes and good things will happen. That obviously tends to be the case. John Ewing, who's a big betting data analyst, I think for BetMGM, notes that Mahomes is 8-3 straight up as an underdog, 9-1-1 against the spread as an underdog. Also, just like pause. It's insane that they've only been underdogs 11 times, like in his career, dating back to 2018. That's preposterous. The Ravens have kind of notably not been as great against the spread at home. They're 17-25 against the 17-25-1 against the spread at home since 2019, which was the first year that Lamar took over as the main starter for them. Obviously, some Tyler Huntley mixed in there, but that's just the overall mark for Baltimore. But it is important to note that the average spread in that sample is 6.5, so that we're talking about a much different number at this point. In the end, I think if Baltimore wins, I think they win rather convincingly. If this is a close game, I give the lean to Kansas City, but I'm going to say it. I think Baltimore wins this one by a touchdown or more. All
right, there we go. For your sake and for your dad's sake, I hope that's the case. I'm already on the record on XM taking the Chiefs to cover, but I think the Ravens win the game. I'm threading a tight needle here, but I think we get a 23-20, 24-21 type of game. Maybe a nice little Tucker game-winning field goal. But I think the Ravens find a way to win. I don't think it's going to be pretty necessarily. I personally would be surprised if they do run away with this game. Again, for your sake, I hope they do. But I think Mahomes keeps it close. I think it's more of a defensive game. I don't think either team is scoring on 5 straight drives at any point in the game. So I'll take the Ravens to win a close one, but the Chiefs get the cover. Let's do Lions-Niners. Got about 10 more minutes here. Niners 7-point favorites, total up at 51. And like the other game, this number has not really budged. Excuse me, as I completely lose my voice here. Has not really budged throughout the week. I think there's kind of 2 ways to look at this. One is, the Niners showed some concerns last week against Green Bay. I am of the belief that Brock Purdy plays better this week. I think he was significantly impacted by the rain to a degree that I did not really expect. Of course, we need to find out what the status is of Deebo Samuel. I think he pushes them from very, very good team to like potentially all-time elite type of team when you talk about the talent on that offense. So that's the big question mark as of right now. I also could see the Niners just completely rolling the Detroit Lions, because as fun of the story as this has been, I'm like the last person still holding out that I still think this Lions team is a cut below elite territory. And I think if you had told the Niners before the year, if you had told them in the middle of the season, hey, the Detroit Lions at home, that's what's standing between you and the Super Bowl, they would absolutely love this matchup.
Right. And a lot of the times conference championship weekend, we get one good game and one not so good game. If you told me that this was the matchup a week ago, without seeing how the games unfolded this past weekend, I would have been of the belief that the Lions were in big trouble here. After Sunday and kind of letting it settle, it was like, maybe the Lions have a chance to stick with them here. And again, that you're just talking about a 7-point spread in this one, but even with the Deebo Samuel stuff, I think that to almost a lesser extent of what I was talking about with Baltimore and Lamar in the rough first half, it took the Niners a full game basically to get themselves in gear, but they did. in the end. And I think that, this is a team that I've felt has been the best in football on the balance of the entire season. I know it was a dicey game last week. The Packers were red hot. The weather certainly wasn't helping out Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, like you said. But I think I'm landing back on the side that the Niners take care of business here rather convincingly. I think that the secondary for the Lions and the problems that they have are going to get a little bit exposed here. I think Kyle Shanahan is just a little bit too masterful against Aaron Glenn and what is a pretty shoddy secondary, I'd say, overall for Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Niners played on balance like a B game, maybe even less, maybe a B- game last week if you factor in how Purdy played, and they still won against a Packers team that played pretty well. There are some big things that went against Green Bay, not converting the fourth down, a couple dropped interceptions, especially the Savage one early on. And what worries me is that if Brock Purdy makes those same mistakes, I think Detroit is capitalizing, right? I mean, they're like +7 on the turnover margin over the last few weeks. I mean, this is a defense that does create turnovers as Swiss cheese as that secondary has been. So I think if Purdy's lofted balls out there, CJ Gardner-Johnson's not dropping it in the same way that Darnell Savage is. So there is a chance here for the Lions, I think, to jump out to a hot start. I also think the lack of home field for Detroit can't be overstated here. I mean, they have had a massive home field advantage each of the last 2 weeks. Huge win over the Rams in the wild card. I had nothing to say about that. Nothing against Detroit. I mean, I thought the Rams were winning that game. That was a huge win. I think they lucked out getting Tampa Bay in round 2. And I was a little concerned. Like there were a couple times where we felt like the Lions put that game away in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden, Tampa Bay rallies back. They're hitting big plays through the air, and it's like, man, if Baker Mayfield and Cade Otton are doing that, what is Brock Purdy and George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk and potentially Deebo Samuel? What are those guys going to do? And the other thing with San Francisco, for as many things as went wrong for them, like the explosives were still there against Green Bay, right? I mean, you still saw McCaffrey running through tackles, ripping off big runs. You had the big one to George Kittle in the first half. Like it wasn't as much of a complete, top-down disaster, I think, as it seemed at times for the Niners. And I also love the belief that I don't think they play that type of game twice in a row, right? Like that was the spot where they should have gotten tripped up, right? I think Green Bay should have won that game. San Francisco probably realizes that. I don't think they let their guard down again this week. And again, I think the Lions hang in. I don't think we get a total disaster here on the Detroit side. I don't think this is like a blow-up game necessarily, but I think Niners at home against a shaky defense that I still don't trust. And I know the Lions have been very good against the run. The numbers on balance this season have been much better than you think. I don't know if that applies against San Francisco, man. Christian McCaffrey, those guys, it's a completely different beast going up against the Niners, especially after facing the Bucs last week. I mean, this is a huge jump in competition. So if I have to go one way or the other on the 7, I'm taking the Niners to cover.
Yep, I'm with you there. I think there is the possibility that I'm not expecting it. I'm kind of with you where this isn't a blowout, but I think if there is blowout potential, it's obviously on San Francisco's side here. And I think do have a little bit of concern about Jared Goff showing up and having those wacky turnovers that ultimately get capitalized on by San Francisco. So a little bit worried about that. We'll see if Detroit sticks to the ground game much, because I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs can be kind of a big X factor in this one. Montgomery kind of the hammer. But yeah, overall, like I want to see this game be really close and competitive. And the Lions are just such a fun story. But the Niners they've been in this spot so much. I think they punched their ticket to the Super Bowl, and I think they do it by more than 7.
They have been in this spot and they've come up short, and that I think that's what Niners detractors would tell you. But I think this is a better version. This is the best version I think we've seen of the Niners. And that goes all the way back to even those Kaepernick teams, right? I mean, this team it's the most talented team in the NFL. It's been the most consistent team in the NFL when healthy, like you said. I do think if Deebo's not out there, though, that does matter. It's obviously they have other playmakers, but that takes them to that almost untouchable gear at times when he's right. And, I think a big part of the reason why Green Bay was able to hang around is they didn't have to worry about Deebo Samuel for virtually the entire game. I mean, obviously he ended up going out with the shoulder, but even before that, he was being evaluated for a concussion. I think he only played something like 9 snaps. So, I think that's the player that you're most worried about, maybe other than McCaffrey, on this entire team. And for the Packers, I mean, that had to be a pretty huge sigh of relief. 5 minutes into the game, you're just like, all right, we don't have to worry about this anymore.
Right. But I guess the sort of counterpoint to it as it comes for this week is like San Francisco, they went into last week prepared to use a lot of Deebo Samuel, and then that got kind of taken off the table for them. This week, they know that at best they're going to get a limited version of him. So I would imagine that Shanahan is getting things kind of adjusted accordingly in the event that Samuel is limited or out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Anything you like on the prop side of things? I'm looking at St. Brown. The over 83.5 receiving yards is tempting. Although you look at a lot of the big plays that the Packers had last week, it's like defenders were falling all over the place for San Francisco. I think there was a decided cleats advantage for the Packers. Not that obviously the offense was humming and they were running the ball better than I expected, but I don't think you get, good secondary players just on the ground as much this week necessarily. So, that's something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on, but Detroit just doesn't really have a whole lot other than St. Brown. To me, that's kind of the one big hole on what's otherwise a very talented roster and one that's going to keep getting better. And, obviously they found ways to use Gibbs as a pass catcher, and that's helped offset the fact that they don't have a true number two. But they need Amon-Ra St. Brown to have, well over 100 yards in this game, I think, to have a chance. So I think we get a funnel there. I don't even mind, the over on 7.5 catches, but I would take the over on 83.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the receptions in particular, because I think that one is a little bit less game script dependent. Like I think either way, Amon-Ra St. Brown is getting double-digit targets, and I think he's reeling in a really high percentage of them. The yardage, I think, is a little bit more in line with how well that San Francisco is able to keep a lid on him and limit that yards after the catch for him, because he's not necessarily like a huge downfield guy. But I think regardless, he gets fed, so that they over on the 7.5, which I believe you can get at plus money over at BetMGM and DraftKings. I think that would be my preferred option of targeting that one.
I think we also get another Kittle game here, especially if Deebo doesn't play or if he's limited. And even if Deebo's out there, like he's the number one guy who's liable to get hurt in game, right? I mean, he's unfortunately in that basket of guys that even when he starts the game, you're like, all right, just crossing your fingers. We talked a lot last week about Green Bay being terrible against tight ends. I think the George Kittle breakout was predictable. Detroit's better. They're not a whole lot better. I mean, they're bottom 10 in just about every defense first position metric against tight ends. They're allowing about 7.8 yards per target. Only a handful of teams allowed more total targets to tight ends on the year. In terms of just bulk yardage, they're 27th in the NFL. So, especially if they're selling out to stop Christian McCaffrey, if they want to try to control that first and foremost. And if Deebo's not out there, I like the over on 59.5 receiving yards for Kittle, and I think would be interested in the anytime TD.
Yeah, I like the touchdown call as well, and I think Ayuk, if the conditions are a little bit better for Purdy to not be affected by the weather, I think the downfield passing game gets a little bit more featured. So I would also take a pretty close look at some Brandon Ayuk stuff, and not sure if I'm going to dabble far enough down into the well to touch anything Juwan Jennings related, though.
All right. So if that sounds like we're both leaning Niners -7.
We are.
All right. I'm taking it as well. I'll go over 51 too. I think the Niners pull their weight here. I think they score in the 30s this week. Again, you go back to last week and it's like nothing really felt like it was going right for the Niners until late in that game. They still put up 24 points in a game where they struggled to move the ball for the most part. Green Bay won the possession battle. They won the plays battle. San Francisco had a slightly higher yards per play, but I think we get a much better version of the Niners this week. And I think Detroit puts up points as well. I mean, this could be a 33-24 type of game to me.
My lean is the under. I'm a little bit more concerned that the Lions hold up their end of the bargain on the scoreboard. So I think that this ends up being, it's going to be close to that number. It's what, 50? 51, 51, depending on 51. So, yeah, I worry that the Lions kind of cap out at 20 or potentially even 17 if the Niners really do hem things in defensively.
All right, there we have it. We are on I'm on the Kansas City Chiefs. You're on the Baltimore Ravens. We are both on the 49ers to cover that 7. We're split on the total. John, glad we were able to squeeze this in. Wish we could talk a little bit more. I know you got to run. I got to run as well, but best of luck to you this weekend, man. Molly asked me the other night, it's like, who are you rooting for now that the Jags aren't in and the Packers are eliminated? Pretty easy answer, man. I'm rooting for the Ravens. I want to see my guy.
Much appreciated that. We need everyone on this wall with us this weekend to stop the Taylor Swift propaganda. No, I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm all the things, but I appreciate it. I'm glad to have you aboard. There is space on the bandwagon. I made sure to save for you. And beyond that, hit them straight out in Arizona. Enjoy, man.
Will do, man. Will do. I'll let you know how it goes, and we will talk next week. Enjoy the weekend. Best of luck to everybody listening along. You can find this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, archived on YouTube, and always live on our Twitter accounts as well. John, enjoy the game, man. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.